For more than 2,500 years, one face has come to symbolize terror. A woman with snakes for hair, eyes that could turn anyone who looked upon her into stone. Her name was Medusa. Even today, she appears in films, books, paintings, and video games as one of mythology's greatest monsters. But what if that image is only half the story? What if Medusa was not remembered for who she truly was, but for what she became? To answer that question, we must go back to the beginning. Long before she became the creature feared across the ancient world, Medusa belonged to a family known as the Gorgons. According to the Greek poet Hesiod, there were 3 Gorgon sisters: Stheno, Euryale, and Medusa. Yet one detail made Medusa different from her sisters. Stheno and Euryale were immortal. Medusa was not. She was the only Gorgon destined to die. Why the ancient Greeks imagined one mortal Gorgon among 2 immortal sisters remains uncertain, but that distinction would eventually shape one of mythology's most famous stories. As Greek mythology evolved, Medusa's character also changed. In some of the earliest traditions, she appears simply as a terrifying monster from the beginning. But centuries later, the Roman poet Ovid presented a very different version in his Metamorphoses. According to Ovid, Medusa had once been a beautiful young woman. Her beauty was legendary. Ancient writers described her long hair as her most admired feature, attracting attention wherever she went. She was also said to serve in the temple of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, strategy, and war. Whether she was truly a priestess or simply associated with Athena's sanctuary depends on which ancient source is followed. This is important, because Greek mythology does not exist as a single, fixed story. Different poets, living in different centuries, often told the same myth in completely different ways. Rather than one official version, there are many. That is one reason Medusa remains such a fascinating figure today. Was she born a monster, or was she transformed into one? Even the ancient world could not fully agree. Yet every version of the story points toward one moment that changed everything. A meeting involving 3 unforgettable names: Medusa, Poseidon, and Athena. It is a story that has been debated for nearly 2,000 years. A story that transformed a woman into a legend, and a legend into one of history's most misunderstood monsters. Everything changed inside the temple of Athena. It is one of the most famous moments in Greek mythology. Yet it is also one of the most debated. According to the Roman poet Ovid, the sea god Poseidon desired Medusa and pursued her into Athena's sacred temple. There, the sanctuary was violated, an act that enraged the goddess. But here, an important distinction must be made. Ovid's version is not the oldest version of the myth. Earlier Greek writers, including Hesiod, never described this event. In those earlier traditions, Medusa simply exists as one of the Gorgons, without the story of a transformation from a beautiful woman. This difference matters, because there is no single, official version of Medusa's story. Greek and Roman myths evolved over centuries, with each author reshaping familiar legends for a new audience. In Ovid's account, Athena faced an impossible choice. She could not punish Poseidon. He was one of the 12 Olympian gods and her divine equal. Instead, her anger fell upon Medusa. The young woman who had once been admired for her beauty was transformed forever. Her flowing hair became a mass of living snakes. Her face became so terrifying that anyone who looked directly into her eyes would instantly turn to stone. She was no longer welcomed among people. She was feared. Driven into exile, Medusa was forced to live far from the cities of Greece, where few dared to follow. Over time, her name became synonymous with horror. Travelers spoke of a creature whose gaze meant certain death. Warriors searched for glory by hunting her. Children grew up hearing stories of the monster no one could defeat. Yet there is something deeply tragic about the myth. If we follow Ovid's version, Medusa did not choose the life forced upon her. She did not seek power. She did not ask to become a monster. She became one because of the actions and decisions of others. This interpretation has led many modern readers to see Medusa not simply as a villain, but as one of mythology's most tragic figures. Ancient audiences, however, did not necessarily see the story in the same way. To them, myths often explored the overwhelming power of the gods and the harsh consequences of divine will. Justice was not always fair. The gods were not always merciful, and mortals rarely had the power to change their fate. Whether Medusa was born a monster or became one, her transformation was complete. But far away, another story was beginning. A young hero had just accepted a mission that almost everyone believed was impossible. His name was Perseus. By the time Perseus entered the story, Medusa had already become a legend, not because anyone had seen her and returned safely, but because no one had. Every tale ended the same way. A warrior would seek her out and never come back. Perseus did not choose this quest willingly. According to Greek mythology, the mission began when King Polydectes of the island of Seriphos demanded an impossible gift: the head of Medusa. It was a task designed to ensure Perseus would never return. Instead, it would make him one of Greece's greatest heroes. The gods themselves became involved. Hermes, the messenger of the gods, gave Perseus a curved sword capable of cutting through Medusa's scales. Athena presented him with a highly polished bronze shield, not as a weapon, but as a mirror. Looking directly at Medusa meant certain death. The only chance of survival was to watch her reflection instead. Before he could find Medusa, Perseus faced another challenge. He first had to locate the Graeae, 3 mysterious sisters who shared a single eye and a single tooth between them. Waiting until one sister passed the eye to another, Perseus seized it. Blind and helpless, the Graeae had little choice but to reveal the location of the hidden Gorgons. Only then did Perseus continue his journey. Ancient myths describe him receiving additional gifts: winged sandals that allowed him to fly, a magical pouch to safely carry Medusa's head, and the helmet of Hades, said to make its wearer invisible. Whether viewed as symbols or divine miracles, these gifts reflected an important theme in Greek mythology. Even the greatest heroes rarely succeeded through strength alone. They relied on intelligence, preparation, and the favor of the gods. Eventually, Perseus reached the remote place where the Gorgon sisters slept. There, surrounded by silence and stone, lay Medusa. According to the myth, she was the only sleeping figure among the 3 sisters because she alone was mortal. Perseus raised Athena's shield. Not once did he look directly at her. Guided only by her reflection, he prepared to strike. The moment that would define both their destinies had finally arrived. The cave was silent. Only the sound of slow breathing echoed through the darkness. Perseus stepped forward carefully, never allowing his eyes to leave the reflection in Athena's polished shield. One mistake, one glance, would end his life instantly. According to the myth, Medusa slept beside her immortal sisters, Stheno and Euryale. Unlike them, she alone could die. That was why Perseus had been sent to hunt her. Taking one final step forward, he raised the curved sword given to him by Hermes. Then he struck. With a single blow, Perseus severed Medusa's head. But her death did not mark the end of the story. It marked the beginning of another. From Medusa's blood emerged two extraordinary beings. The first was Pegasus, the magnificent winged horse that would become one of Greek mythology's most recognizable creatures. The second was Chrysaor, a warrior often described as carrying a golden sword. According to the myth, both were the children of Poseidon and Medusa, brought into the world only at the moment of her death. The cave erupted into chaos. Awakened by the attack, the immortal Gorgon sisters rushed toward Perseus. Their screams echoed across the mountains as they searched for the killer. But Perseus had one final advantage. Using the helmet of Hades, he disappeared from sight and escaped before the sisters could catch him. Even after her death, Medusa remained terrifying. Her severed head retained its power to turn anyone who looked upon it into stone. Throughout his journey home, Perseus used it as a weapon against those who threatened him. Ancient myths tell of enemies transformed into lifeless statues with a single glance. Eventually, Perseus returned the head to Athena. Rather than destroying it, the goddess placed it upon her shield, the Aegis. There, Medusa's face became a symbol of divine protection and overwhelming power. Across ancient Greece, warriors, temples, shields, and city gates were decorated with the image of the Gorgonian, the face of Medusa. It was believed to frighten away evil and protect those who displayed it. Ironically, the woman once feared as a monster became one of the most powerful protective symbols in the ancient world. Her story should have ended there. But over the centuries, the meaning of Medusa would continue to change. And that may be the greatest mystery of all. For more than 2,000 years, people have remembered Medusa as a monster, a creature whose gaze brought death, a villain defeated by a legendary hero. But the deeper we explore the ancient sources, the more complicated her story becomes. One reason is that there was never a single version of the myth. In Hesiod's Theogony, written around the 8th century BC, Medusa appears simply as one of the three Gorgons. She is already a terrifying creature, and there is no story of her once being a beautiful woman. Nearly 700 years later, the Roman poet Ovid told a very different story. In his Metamorphoses, Medusa begins as a beautiful young woman whose life is forever changed after her encounter with Poseidon in Athena's temple. Both stories survived. Neither completely replaced the other. This is one of the defining features of Greek and Roman mythology. Myths evolved. Each generation reshaped familiar stories to reflect its own beliefs, values, and questions. That is why asking which version is correct is often impossible. They are different traditions, not different chapters of the same book. Over time, Medusa's image also changed. The ancient Greeks often placed her face on shields, temples, armor, and city gates. Known as the Gorgonian, it was believed to protect against evil by frightening away anyone who wished to cause harm. To them, Medusa was not only something to fear. She was also something that offered protection. Centuries later, artists, writers, and scholars began interpreting her in entirely new ways. Some viewed her as a tragic victim. Others saw her as a warning about the unpredictable power of the gods. Modern literature and art have continued to reinterpret her story, making Medusa one of the most discussed figures in all of mythology. What has never changed is humanity's fascination with her. Perhaps that is because Medusa represents something larger than a single myth. She reminds us that history and mythology are often told from the perspective of those who survive. Heroes become legends, monsters become symbols, and sometimes the line between them begins to disappear. So, How did Medusa become history's most misunderstood monster? Not because her story was forgotten, but because it was told and retold for more than 2,000 years, changing with every generation that inherited it. Whether you see her as a monster, a victim, or simply a myth shaped by countless storytellers, one thing is certain. Very few figures from the ancient world continue to challenge our understanding of heroism, justice, and memory quite like Medusa. And perhaps that is why. Her eyes still seem to follow us across history, not to turn us into stone, but to make us question the stories we have always believed.